For the glitch here. Let me go ahead and get started again. Welcome everybody to our first live stream. My name is Joshua Brown and I am with higherpowers.net, a career development website. Today we're going to be covering the topic of resumes. But first of all, I just wanted to welcome you all to the stream. If you want to go ahead and subscribe, you can get access and notice to all our future streams. I'm not sure how I'm going to be doing this, if it's going to be a weekly thing, a monthly thing. So if you could leave a comment too, any feedback would be great. Getting started with this, is an undertaking, so we want to make sure that it's something of value and of use. The resume, just for your information, that we're going to be covering today is available on our website, higherpowers.net. If you go and click on resume templates up at the top, you can download that for free. All right, so let's go ahead without further ado and we'll get started talking about the resume information. So this is kind of a basic information about the resumes that we want to talk about first. Then we want to build a base and continue to add information, and as you get more technical with building the resume, you're going to see some of the feedback that you're going to get improve. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So with this resume here, again, it's pretty standard. So we start off with our heading information. Then we have the professional summary. This is where you may have an objective some years ago, but actually we can say for the most part it's going to be a professional summary that's going to be preferred. We'll talk about the cases that you're going to be using an objective. Okay. Then we have our skills and abilities section here, followed up by the employment listings, your employment history. Again, a number of different ways that you can list this information, and we're going to cover each of these sections individually and then talk about some general resume information. Also wanted to add that if you have any questions at all during the live chat here, go ahead and type them in the chat. I'm trying to pay attention to that as we're going through, so feel free to interrupt me. Also at the end of this, I'll have more than enough time to answer any questions that you may have that may have skipped your mind while you were watching. If you catch this later on, not in the live stream, but just as a regular old video, leave your questions in the comments and I will get to those as soon as I can and answer those questions and help you out along the way, because I know that a lot of this information is going to be general. We're going to talk about some specific scenarios, but your mileage may vary, I guess, to put it a certain way. So after our employment history, then we have the education. Okay, so let's just step back here for a minute of the actual structure, and I want to give you a few kind of overlapping or underlying tips that are going to help you throughout this process when you're actually making the resume, submitting the resume, things like that, when you're actually in the nuts and bolts of the process. The first thing is that you want to do a good amount of research even before you actually submit your resume. Most people do this as a part of, say, the interview process, or before they go for an interview, they want to do research then. I say that you want to at least get a glimpse of the company that you're applying to before you actually do the application. Part of this is you want to understand what type of company they are. Maybe their mission statement, things like that, the company structure. And again, with all this information I'm talking about, you may not get it right away, and it may not even be available to you. So you want to find out as much as you can, but I understand that sometimes you're applying to a listing on Craigslist, you're not going to find a great amount of information. So having said that, you want to understand, okay, how are they accepting applications? Is it through their own website, through some kind of clunky system? All right, that's going to give you a tip on how they're going to go through that process. It's going to be maybe a little bit longer. You're going to have to do even more follow-up just to follow your resume throughout the process. Or is it your resume is actually going to the hiring manager directly? You're emailing them through Craigslist. Indeed has a feature like that where the actual hiring manager, even if it's set up through corporate or something like that, can actually review the resume. So who's going to be that first point of contact for your resume? Is it going to be a computer system, or is it going to be a live human being? And even sometimes further than that, is this person the owner of the company? Is it that small? So who's asking the questions? And then you're going to rely a lot as you're building your resume, obviously on the actual job listing. So the things that it talks about in terms of skill sets, the job summary, all those types of things are going to shape how you respond. So, taking a look at that information before you even start to work on the resume or the job application, that's going to be key. And then what you can do is actually save that information, bookmark it, and then let's say you do get that call back. Great, you can go back to that information and do an even more thorough search of what's their company stand for. Do they volunteer in the community? What can I bring to an interview? What connections can I make? So, doing that research. The second part is the amount of companies that you are applying to each day. You really don't want to, in my estimation, there's this old adage, this old attitude of, this is your job. Being unemployed is your job. Finding a job is your job. So you have to work 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day. If you're not, then you're really slouching. And I can tell you just from my own personal experience and working with people that are searching for a job, especially right out of school, this can be a very, very demoralizing process. Finding a job may be one of the toughest jobs out there from a mental standpoint, because there's nobody that is there to keep you in check. And again, people will say, oh, well, it should be its own reward. You should be able to get up for that. You should be able to motivate yourself to do that. Well, it's a very difficult process. There's nobody to keep you kind of in line, in check. So if you're not naturally good with the technology aspect of it, you don't have any experience looking for a job. So that's what videos hopefully like this can help you. So I would say cut that down in half. Really devote yourself to maybe 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day sometime. So generally maybe 20 hours a week somewhere. Do some work on the weekends of touching up a resume, working on a cover letter. But if you really work hard during those hours, you won't get demoralized, because again, in a normal job you have goals, you hit those goals, even if it's like say a 3 to 6 month process, there's some reward, what the bar is. Without, you don't get those responses on your resumes, again, it can be a very demoralizing process, and I don't want you to get burnt out, on the first week and you're just sending out a bunch of resumes. So to piggyback on that, the third piece of advice is that you really need to be changing your resume for every job application. And when I say that, I mean when you think it's appropriate to do so. Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the additional parts of the resume. But really understand that, again, because you're not doing the 8 hours a day, you're doing the 4 hours a day, you're taking some time back, you still want to put as much time as possible into each job application. Okay, in my experience, this isn't quite a numbers game. You don't want to use a shotgun approach, partially because if you are not changing your resume, if you're not custom tailoring it to each individual job application, you are really not optimizing your chances to get a job. In fact, you may be hurting yourself because you've created this resume, let's say it was even 6 months ago, 3 months ago. So many things can change in the job landscape, so many different companies. What we'll end up talking about is you want to kind of match the language of the job application, and you can really only do that if you are changing it as you go. Okay, now the overarching theme of this should be you never want to make up information, right? This is the cardinal sin of resumes. Do not lie, do not make up stories, do not really even need to embellish that much in your resume. In my opinion, the truth is good enough. But what we do want to do is, in terms of companies maybe in the same industry, they may do the same things, but they may call it different things. They may call procedures different things. They may have different job titles. Okay, you want to use their language to explain the things that you've already done, the experience that you already have. Okay, so again, combined with the research and taking more time to actually change your resume, you aren't going to apply to as many places. So to me, it's okay if you are sending out 5 really good resumes a day, then you're doing a really good job. Again, part of the process will be to follow up. I say on a weekly basis. You never want to be too pushy. You want to say, hopefully you can. There's an opportunity to go in, drop off a resume, and then you ask permission to follow up on that. You don't want to call where your call is not wanted. There's a busy office. Whatever the case may be. But you want to be able to devote some of your time to the resumes and some of your time to the follow up. So all of these things, those 3 things: the research, the amount of time you're spending, and the amount of job applications you're actually filling out. Think about those things as we go through each part of the resume. Okay, and I said I know that was the last thing, but I'll say again, the last thing to think about is try and put yourself, I know it may be difficult, try and put yourself into the role of the hiring manager for that position. And you may be saying, well, I don't even have experience as an employee. I don't have any experience. How do I have experience, or how can I imagine what it's like to hire somebody? Okay, think about the things that you would want in this particular role. Okay, for this particular person. If you had to manage somebody, what would you want their strengths to be? Where could you manage their weaknesses? All right, what specific skills, if any, do they need to have? Whether it be a software, whether they're a medical technician, they need to be able to draw blood. Okay, across the whole spectrum of jobs, are there specific skills that they need to have? Okay, what and how can that be placed on the resume? So, again, I know that you may not be able to think about it in this way, but try and, as we go through each section, okay, how can I maximize my resume to fit what they are asking for? Okay, who's asking for that information? What level are they in the company? All those questions. It can be hard to manage, but that's why you're taking this amount of time to study it and to go over it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the heading information. Now this one has the name, still probably the biggest and boldest thing on the page, but I usually even like to make it a little bit bigger, just because I'm not really into that whole my name is my brand and you have to pump up your personal brand. But just in terms of if it ever got to where it was a stack of papers, I would want my name to be the biggest and the boldest. Okay, so as they're going through it, they can hopefully remember it. Oh, that was Joshua's resume. That's kind of my thinking there. You don't want to make it comical where it takes up probably more than half of the page here. But just something to think about if you have your name kind of getting lost in the rest of the hierarchy of what's going on with this page here. Okay, so we have the other contact information, a telephone number, an email address. You may also have a web address for a LinkedIn account, or if you have, if you're a programmer, you have different, what the depositories for code. Your portfolio, whatever that is, that can be on there. Personally, this is something that comes up a lot. I like to just have the city and state. I try to avoid having, especially again if it's on a piece of paper where it can be passed around the office, having my full address and my name connected. It's probably out there, but it's not something that I'm totally comfortable with. I would hope that they can contact me via phone or email. That's why I have that information there. And to me, the location is just telling them, okay, I am in the area. I consider myself to be in the area where I would be able to make it into work every day. All right, that should be the only real consideration of the employer. So if it ever comes up, that would be my answer is I can come into work every day. Whether I live 2 hours away, I'm really making that commute. Because you don't want to lie about this, because they're going to ask for it anyway. They're going to get your address, when they're filling out the actual paperwork to get you started, if that ends up happening. So that's why it's important to maintain the truth, right? Because it's much more difficult to lie. Just as a kind of a reminder, this is particular template. Everything is kind of going in an order. I just how I designed it. It doesn't have to be the way that you work this. We'll talk a little bit about the order of things afterwards, but really the professional summary and the heading are going to be the only things that we want absolutely at the top. Everything else is kind of interchangeable. So again, another thing to keep in mind. Okay, so for the next part, we have our professional summary here. Again, this is also an area that used to be the objective. And really, I much prefer professional summary. If you have a lot of experience, one thing that I like to do in bold or in bigger letters here is to put the amount of experience that you have in a specific industry. So for example, let's say that you have been a journeyman electrician, you're certified, you have all of the licensing for your particular state, you're looking for a job, you've been working for 10 years, you just got laid off, and as you're applying, you see, okay, companies are asking for at least 5 to 7 years experience. Well, I have 10 years experience. So right underneath my name, I want it to say 10 year plus experience journeyman electrician. All right, something very, very simple. Okay, and then if that's the case, if you're kind of getting that vibe from them, that's really one of the most important things about it is the experience. And as you're going through saying, yeah, I not only know how to do that, I've done it, multiple times, multiple years. If that's the vibe you're getting, that's what you want to put in place of this professional summary. Okay, if you get less of that vibe, to me, that's where we go with the professional summary. This is more general. That's more for technical types of jobs. Also, I'm trying to think of other examples. Again, if you have a lot of experience in a specific industry, or if you can kind of wrap it, let's say you've had done sales and customer service, you could say 5+ years experience, customer service professional. Again, if they are really emphasizing the amount of experience and you see that you have that experience doing what they're asking for in the job application. Professional summary, again, it's kind of more general, but you want to convey the same type of message. So this is something that you want to pull possibly from the job summary. Okay, what are they saying is the basic outlay of the job? That way you can kind of match it to what does your body of experience look like. Again, you're not replacing your experience with what they're asking for. You already have this experience. Those are the people I'm talking to. We're not making stuff up. I want to make that clear. I know I keep saying that, but sometimes it can be difficult. But what we want to do is to explain our past experience with the language that they are using. So, how are they summarizing it? What's the thesis? To use literature terms. What's the thesis of the job? Okay, now how can I explain what's my thesis of my past experience? How can we kind of match those two? That's what a professional summary is really good for. So starting you off, again, this one is probably the least, or excuse me, the most optional of the rest of the things that we have on here. So again, try and get a feel for it. As you go through more and more applications, you'll kind of see, okay, what are they really emphasizing? What are they really looking for? What's most important to them? That's what I want to put first on my resume after my heading. Okay. Now we mentioned the objective. I really only like the objective if we are talking about somebody who doesn't have really any experience at all. And traditionally, the objective is about talking about what you'd like to achieve. It says something like, looking for a job in customer service where I can utilize my communication skills or something like that. We'll talk about using vague type skills like communication in a moment, but objectives usually just take up space on the resume that could be hopefully better utilized, either with education. Obviously if you don't have a lot of experience, that's why it would be on there, is because you want to fill up the resume. If you do use an objective, try and really summarize what the job is, and how your education and any experience that you do have, even if it is education based, an internship, volunteering, how do the two coincide? What have you been working on? What have you been studying that makes you think this job, it's really what I've been working towards, it's what I've been studying towards? Okay, again, one sentence, maybe two if you're really explaining it well. Even with the professional summary, you really don't want to go over a sentence. You want to save as much space as possible really for the stuff that we have going on later down the page. Okay, so again, if you guys have questions about when to use one of those things, leave those questions in the comments. That'll be really helpful. I'm sure a lot of people have that question. Next up, we have our skills and abilities section. This section, again, probably second to most optional of, next to the professional summary. The skills and abilities section is really going to be job dependent. Okay, so people, the example that I like to use are really in the trades. So again, the electrician, the medical assistant, a dental assistant, blood draws. I have to be able to do an IV. I have to be able to do a urinalysis. I've been working on some projects with pharmacy technicians. Being able to do the dosages. Have you been working on compounding? Think about the specific skills. Let's say even in a customer service job, right? The basic kind of stuff used to be, do you know how to use Microsoft Word, the Microsoft Office suite in general? That was kind of what you would put on there. Now it's kind of more, that specific knowledge is kind of, in my opinion, thought to be more like, you just need to know this. I don't need to know that you know it on the resume. I just hope that you know it because it's so, computers are used so much more in lower and lower education. So kind of hope for, I guess. But if you don't have a lot of things in your resume, then that's one thing that you might put in there. But you kind of get the idea, is that the skills and abilities section is important if, again, you're looking through the job listing. We want to tie everything back. So you have this section if you have a lot of specific skills to list, maybe certain licenses, certifications, and you'll know that you want to post this information here specifically if they have a skills section. Do they have underneath the requirements? What does that look like? If it's just the be 18 years old, no felonies type stuff, you wouldn't put that there. But if they go into more detail about the job, and again, you may have to tie in things from a job summary, a job outline. I'm using specific terms, but there's a lot of different terms that companies are going to use to describe the actual job. So that's why the research is so important, to see, okay, what are they asking for? Is it something that I can best, because what we're talking about here is how can I best explain that, yes, I can do that, yes, I know that. And a skills and abilities section, if there's a lot of those little bits and pieces of knowledge, can best be utilized and told right up front, in the top third of the resume. Part of this, again, where we're putting everything is, again, reliant on the job listing. What is their, do they list the skills and abilities type stuff, before even like a job outline? That what's really important to them. We always want to come back to that idea. What's important to them? What have they been asking for throughout the job listing? Well, if it comes down to these skills and abilities, they're really asking for people that have a first aid certification and this or that and the other. Okay, boom, I want to put those on the first third of the page, because my idea, again, going back to that idea of being the hiring manager, I only have a certain amount of time to look at resumes, and I'm going to skim. And sometimes I may not even skim past the first half of the page if it's not catching my attention. If they're not putting, if education doesn't, if I don't care about education, and you put it at the very, very top before a summary, before your skills, you're losing momentum of the person who's reading it. Okay, we'll talk about when to use the education at the top, but that's just an example. Is you have your best fit, and then your least best, or not your worst, because hopefully you don't have a worst, right? But the least comparable skills and least comparable to the job listing, things that are in your background, you put at the bottom. The stuff that is the best match for you, where you just a slam dunk, this is the job of my dreams, this is the the job that I've went to school for, I've had 10 years for, and working my way up. That stuff goes at the top, obviously, and then kind of going down the degradation of skills here. So again, any questions about these skills and abilities, You can leave those in the comments or in the chat here. I'm going to grab a drink of water real quick. Okay, so moving on to the employment history. Again, this may go above it. Doesn't really matter in terms of the overall order, but the employment history. First of all, we want to include a couple different things. So we have your job title. What position was it? You have the employer name, the location. Usually, I just leave the city and state, and then the dates that you worked there. I usually like to leave month and year, and then you can just, if you're currently working there, it would say present. So that's the basic information, and then usually we have some type of description. Now again, these types of things, if you have similar experience, these should almost be pulled from the job listing. Okay, now how can I put this in my own words? How can I make it match my experience more? But it's basically describing the same type of job, the same activities that I did, the same accomplishments maybe that they're asking for. But we're just using their language, right? We're speaking their language. Now, as far as the other 4 pieces of information that we just talked about here, these in this resume, they're all equal, and you can kind of see the hierarchy of things, where your eye should go. Generally having good amount of white space to kind of let the reader's eye flow, and part of that is, or can be at least, designating one of the items throughout your job listing as bold or bigger, or differentiated in some way. So let's say, for example, you have a really good track record. You've just worked for some really great companies, and not only are they great, that they're known, whether they're known for performance in the industry, or maybe they're just famous. They're just a technology company that people know, and it's prestigious, right? So maybe you want to emphasize in bold the company names that you've worked for, right? That gives your resume a little bit more pop, and it says, as I'm going through, oh, this person's worked here. Well, I know that's a tough gig to get into, right? Maybe their application process is really tough. Oh, well, he met their standards. That's a good sign. That's a +1 for this guy or gal. So we want to make sure that that's something, a consideration. Let's say that you've had really great job titles. Or, for example, you started at the bottom, and you were just a janitor or a cashier, and now you're an executive manager. Okay, you've had really great job titles. Maybe you bold that information. Okay, we can also talk about some people. There's a functional resume also on the website. I have a YouTube video going over that as well, where you don't even put the dates. You put the companies that you worked for down at the bottom. You have these descriptions underneath more content headings. So let's say, again, going back to a general example of a customer service or a sales job, you would have, it would say here customer service, and then the skills that you used throughout your professional career underneath the customer service heading. Maybe sales, maybe IT, you would use those, again, depending on what type of jobs you're applying to. And that would be for somebody that has maybe a checkered or has a lot of gaps in their work history. So as they're going through, again, we're thinking of, how can I keep this person's attention as long as possible? Okay, they got great skills, they got a great summary, I like that. Oh wow, I like the customer service skills. Oh, well, now I get down to the bottom, and I liked it so much, well, maybe I'll give them a chance. Okay, now you're thinking, oh, well, they're not going to give me a chance, they're going to see that, boom, throw it out. That's very possible. That can happen more than likely if that's a huge thing for them. Maybe they've had a lot of people that have just job hopped. It all depends on the HR or the hiring manager's experience. But I'm just thinking of things that, okay, what can give me an edge, right? What are things that I can do just to keep this person's attention as long as possible? But it really has to be, okay, this other stuff has to be really, really good and laid out really clear, and then I'm going to give them the bad news, right? So you have to think about those things. Don't put the bad news at the top. All right. So that's one way to do it. But generally, I like to have the dates with all the rest of the information. Some people leave it off entirely. I would not do that. They're going to ask for it anyways. Let's say, you really blow them away, but you don't have the dates. You go in there for an interview, you fill out the job application. They're going to find out. And to me, it looks worse if you were hiding something. It just makes it look that way. So, I would rather, not go about it that way. Okay. So just again, something to think about. Going back to the job descriptions that we have here, again, you really want to think about, okay, what are the specific things that they're asking for? And if you can't really match up things, you want to think about transferable skills. Okay, things that, while aren't exactly the things that they're asking for, they are things that are kind of in the same domain. They're things that can get them excited about me as an employee, and then when I get into the interview, boom, I can explain, okay, I know I have this on my resume, here's how it relates to how I can help you, how I can do this job really well. Okay, so you want to be thinking about all those types of things. Generally, you don't want to list, don't be boring with your listings. I think that's the best way to put it. Doing a lot of resume reviews, I remember one specific person worked for a big box store, and basically one of their bullet points was, I move boxes from storage to the shelves. Something very, very boring. It sounds like anybody, absolutely, a child could do this job. Why would I care if you can move boxes around? Talk about accomplishments in some way. Was there a time frame that you had to get this out in? Did you meet that time frame? What was the percentage? Did you have, was this a weekly thing? What are what was at stake for you to do this job? What needed to get done? Okay, even if it's on a very or relatively small scale, you're thinking, oh, well, my boss just would have yelled at me and I had to get it out, before I went to lunch or before work ended that day. Okay, still, you want to explain, what could have happened, you not doing this job. How was this valuable to the company? How was this valuable? How can you turn this into an accomplishment? Okay, so maybe you, instead of talking about just from moving boxes, you go into more detail talking about how often that you had to do this. What the people bringing in the merchandise expected from you to unload the actual merchandise. Okay, there was a 2-hour window to get this done, and we did this every week. Okay, just kind of think outside the box a little bit. Don't want to list really just the things that you did. It sounds monotonous. It sounds boring. Think more in terms of accomplishments. If you really had to brag about yourself, again, you don't even have to embellish, but you can still brag about the things that you did well at your last job, right? Be your own best cheerleader, and this is the perfect opportunity to do it, where you get, maybe not even complete sentences, but this is the bulk of it, right? If they get to this point, you've done a good job, but now you have to really close the deal, because for most resumes, the last thing is going to be the education, and that's just going to be like a rubber stamp. Either you have it or you don't. What are they asking for? Okay. With that in mind, let's get down to the education. This is the last part of the resume here. Again, this has 4 pieces of information. So it has the name of the school, the location of the school, whether you got a diploma or a degree, so high school, whether it was a technical school, was there just a certification, whatever the case may be, and then the date of completion. So you graduated June 2017, it would be June 2017 right here. I like to, some people ask about the education, how long can I put for the expected date? I would say if the expected graduation isn't within a year, generally you could put expected graduation August 2017. I think that's fine, as long as you do some explaining here, and we'll talk about that. If it's more than a year away, I think you can also put maybe the amount of courses that you've taken. Again, you want to kind of feel out, what does are they looking for somebody who has more than just general ed? They really need somebody who's been studying that, or do they just want somebody who's in school, right? Maybe they get something from their state government for having hiring people that are going to school. What are they looking for in terms of the education? That's going to help you decide, okay, how much does it really matter to them how I list this upcoming graduation. Again, same as the employment listings. If, let's say, you've gone to a prestigious school and they're really looking for that, education may go on top. If they're looking for specific certifications that you've gotten at, say, a technical school, that's one of the number one things that they look for on the job listing. Okay, that may jump you up all the way to the top before skills and abilities. Okay. Again, I can't say this enough. You really have to do the research and see, what's most important to them. Generally, though, if they're looking for experienced personnel, I think it's okay for the education to go last. To me, it's the least glamorous. Again, it's like an on-off switch. Do they want it? Is it important to them or not? There's less middle ground, I guess, with the education. Okay, so some things to note. We can describe, just like we did with our job, some things that we have underneath our education. So if you're part of organizations, you're in student government, for high school. Again, the less amount of skills and employment history you have, the more stuff that you'll probably be listing underneath your education. And another thing to keep in mind is, generally you want to have the last degree or certification or whatever that you've earned here. So, for example, if you have a college degree, generally you wouldn't want to put your high school information there. Now, if you have, let's say you earned a certification at a technical school, but they're also in the job listing asking for somebody who has at least a high school diploma or a GED, then maybe you could put both of those. And maybe you describe, underneath your high school, it's just this listing here. You don't have anything underneath it because it's not really important. What's important is the education factor of, the technical school. Okay, so even within the education, there's going to be that hierarchy, and within the employment listings, there's the hierarchy of, what do I want to emphasize the most? Because again, with this page, we generally want to stay on one page unless we have just tons and tons of really relevant experience. Keep it on one page. I really think that going to two, I don't think it really decreases your chances, but I don't think it really adds anything other than kind of a pain for some hiring managers. Some have weird rules about it too. I mean, just the fact that some people think, oh, I'm not going to interview anybody who does two. Some people just make up stupid things in their mind, and it's just good to avoid stupid hiring managers. So, we've gone through the employment listing, the education, skills and abilities, our professional summary, and the heading. So, again, beyond the heading and the professional summary, everything else can change positions based on what's most important to the company, what are they really looking for, and then how does my experience match what they're looking for? What are how are we most compatible, right? So this is the hopefully the 100% stuff, and this is maybe like 70, 60, 50, hopefully not less than that. But if it was 30, 20%, it's definitely staying at the bottom. Okay. So I hope that you've gotten a little bit of information about the process of the resume, understanding a little bit from a background perspective of the hiring manager. Again, if you have any questions about any part of this resume, please leave a comment, a question. I'll get to those as soon as I can. Again, if you want to download this resume, it is available at our website, higherpowers.net. If this was helpful at all, please subscribe. You can be notified of future live broadcasts that we'll be doing. So I just want to thank you all for joining me today, and have a great rest of your day.